while ago, I was thinking of a Pikmin comparison video to make, and because it was snowing a lot outside, I thought of both of the snowy areas in the series, which are the Distant Tundra and the Valley of Repose. And that got me thinking, what other similar areas from different Pikmin games could I compare? And I immediately thought of the Forest of Hope and the Garden of Hope. Not just because of their names, but also because they are both foresty areas, and they are also both the second locations in Pikmin 1 and in Pikmin 3 respectively. So in this video, I'm going to compare the different qualities that every Pikmin area has, which are the scenery, the music, the enemies and wildlife, the gameplay and the puzzles, and finally, the story as to why you were there in the first place. After deciding which area is better than the other in each of the 5 sections, I will add them all up and see which area was better in more sections, and that place will be determined the winner. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. The first section to start us off with is the scenery. Now, at first glance, it's obvious that the Garden of Hope looks way better for a few reasons. Namely the fact that the Garden of Hope came out 12 years later, so there was a lot of time to improve the graphics of Pikmin. But also there's a lot of diversity in the scenery there. You've got the main area that you land in, which is very lush and green. Then later you find the rock Pikmin in a cave that looks very nice, and what you'd expect a cave to look like. Then there are also a bunch more smaller caves throughout the map, which add to the adventure and diversity of the garden. Then later, when you approach the armored Maudad arena for the first time, you get this amazing shot from the ground looking up the giant tree stump that the fight takes place in, which looks absolutely stunning. Then late in the game, you'll come back and find the blue Pikmin in a completely separate section of the map, with a more watery take on the Garden of Hope. And just like everything else, it looks amazing. The water physics in Pikmin 3 are beautiful, and the Quaggled Mireclops arena, with all the mud everywhere, is very unique and once again looks incredible, especially for a game on the Wii U in 2013. But that's pretty much everything in the Garden of Hope in terms of scenery, so let's move on over to the Forest of Hope. And after one glance, you can already tell it's going to be a hard time. The Forest of Hope is really a sad sight in the looks department. At the time in 2001 with the GameCube, this was a very good looking game, but by today's standards, it's really not much. The Forest of Hope is very dim and feels desaturated in a way. And unlike the Garden of Hope, the Forest of Hope is very one-dimensional. Everywhere feels the same, and there's essentially no change in scenery between the area at all, other than the shape of the path of the walls. The forest does have some charm to it though, with it being nostalgic for some older players, but it really is a sad sight to see, so it's pretty obvious that the Garden of Hope wins the Scenery Award. Now for the music of these two areas. The music in both areas is very good for different reasons. The Garden of Hope's music is subtle in its inclusion, but still noticeable. It has very slow-paced moments, and then it gets really high-pitched out of nowhere, but it still sounds very nice when that happens. But no matter which way you put it, it always sounds calm and relaxing to listen to while exploring the garden. There is a problem with the Garden of Hope's music though, and it's that I really struggle to remember it. When I listen to it, it sounds really good, but it just never gets stuck in my head. Unlike the Forest of Hope's music, I could listen to any part of the Forest of Hope's music for like 10 seconds and have the entire theme stuck in my head for the rest of the day, and I wouldn't even be mad because it sounds so good. Everything about it is amazing. It's got that really solid 4-note scale that carries throughout the entire song, and while that is really good by itself, it keeps adding more with the piano in the background as a lower pitch, and later the bongo-like drums that come in, and it just makes everything sound so amazingly good all together. So while I love the Garden of Hope's music, there are some points that I just don't really care about, and I could listen to any part of the Forest of Hope's music and love it more than any part of the Garden of Hope's music. So the Forest of Hope clearly wins the music award. For the next comparison between the two areas, we've got the wildlife and the enemies. The Forest of Hope being from Pikmin 1 means that there's obviously going to be less of a variety of enemies to choose from, simply because they haven't had any enemies before this game. But just because it has less enemies to choose from, doesn't mean it feels repetitive and empty. There are a lot of Bulborbs, 5 of them to be exact, but each of them feels like they fit in, and it doesn't feel like an overused enemy. The forest also has 2 quote-unquote bosses in the area, which are the armored cannon beetle and the burrowing snagret. I say quote-unquote because both these guys are the easiest things known to man. First, the beetle is basically just an enemy with an extra step, which is to throw a Pikmin at its head when it's about to shoot, then attack it with everything you got until it dies. But the best thing about this guy is that it doesn't actually hold onto the ship part that it's guarding. So as long as you can finesse it with Olimar and carry the ship part around the cannon beetle, you can escape without killing it. Then there's the burrowing snagret. I'm sure it was a cool idea for an enemy before Pikmin 2, but I just can't get the image of the 5 burrowing snagrets you have to fight when going to the snagret hole out of my head. But going back to Pikmin 1, The burrowing snagrets in this game suck. And yes, snagrets plural. There are 3 snagrets all together in the same spot, and only one of them has the ship part. So you just have to guess which one it is. Unless you're like me and have memorized which one it is. And these guys are just as annoying as in every other Pikmin game. They take forever to kill, and they're relatively harmless if you know how to fight them, so they're just boring. But after the bosses, that's really everything in the Forest of Hope. Moving over to the Garden of Hope, there's a way bigger variety of enemies in this area. And since the garden is a bigger place, there are a lot more enemies spread around. But there is a trend with enemies in Pikmin 3, and it's that all of them are way too easy. Bulborbs don't feel like a threat if you can swarm their back and kill them in a single second. And even if that doesn't work for whatever reason, you can always throw a Pikmin at their eyes, which stuns them for 3 whole seconds. And that's just the Bulborbs. There are plenty of other enemies that don't feel dangerous at all, like the Wollywogs that literally can't hurt rock Pikmin, and the Toady Bloister that's too slow to attack if you're behind it. Every enemy here is so easy that they feel more annoying than fun to fight. But the area does make up for this by having 2 pretty cool bosses, which are the Armored Maudad and the Quaggled Myreclops. The Maudad's fight is pretty straightforward. Throw rock Pikmin to break its shell in order to attack the soft inside. And while it's pretty simplistic, it is handled really well, with the strategy being easy to learn because it's the first boss, and its attack pattern still being a challenge to get used to. But it can get a tad bit boring after a while though, especially if you already know how to fight it. Then the Myreclops fight is probably my favorite boss fight in all of Pikmin 3, because of how unique it is. The first thing you'll notice about the fight is that the Myreclops is huge. And since the arena is made out of mud, it can create sinkholes filled with water to drown your Pikmin. So you'd think bringing just blue Pikmin to the fight would get around this, right? Well, then you realize it has a giant crystal that protects its head, so you have to use rock Pikmin to break that first. Unfortunately, after breaking the crystal, there isn't anything stopping you from just using blue Pikmin for the rest of the fight, like I said earlier. And as long as you're patient and wait for its slurping attacks, then it can't hurt you at all. So the Myreclops also falls victim to Pikmin 3 being the easiest game in the series. So both of these areas have good enemies for different reasons. The Forest of Hope has really good regular enemies and not that great of bosses, while the Garden of Hope has bad enemies and better bosses. But while the Garden of Hope's bosses are really good, every other enemy there is so easy that it's boring, and sometimes even the bosses can be a little boring too. While on the other hand, enemies from the Forest of Hope are a decent challenge, and even if the bosses are a cakewalk, they can still be a little fun to fight, especially the Cannon Beetle, but not so much the Snagret. Regardless of that, I'll be giving the Enemy Award to the Forest of Hope. On to the next section, which is the puzzles. Now I've mentioned this in a few of the other sections, but Pikmin 1 obviously came first, so it doesn't have as much variety in terms of puzzles when compared to Pikmin 3. But you could say it still has some unique puzzles, like building a bridge, just like you do in Pikmin 3. Anyway, there's also a spot where you have to move a box out of the way so you can get past it, just like in Pikmin 3. Dang it! Are there any puzzles here that aren't in Pikmin 3? I guess there's the spot where you have to blow up some walls with some bomb rocks, just like in Pikmin 3! All jokes aside, obviously the Forest of Hope had the puzzles first, with Pikmin 1 coming before Pikmin 3 and all, but the Garden of Hope executes them so much better than the Forest of Hope, because it feels like you're actually creating the bridge instead of your Pikmin just smacking it until it's built. And in Pikmin 3, you have 3 different captains, so there's so many more ideas the developers could explore, like in the later half of the game, when you have one of my favorite puzzles in the whole game, where you build a platform in the water so that way you can throw your captains to the other side. While in the Forest of Hope, the best puzzle there is to throw some Pikmin to move a box. So clearly, the Garden of Hope has better puzzles, even if some of them are remakes of old ones from Pikmin 1. But regardless, I'll be giving the puzzle award to the Garden of Hope. It's now time for the final section, which is the story behind the areas. The Forest of Hope, like I said earlier, is the second area in Pikmin 1, and you come here the day after you crash land and get the engine in the impact site. When you come to the Forest of Hope, it's because you need more ship parts to repair your ship. That is it. There is no other reason to come here. You could give any other reason to come here and it would be better. While on the other hand, the Garden of Hope has a very important reason to go there at first. Just like the Forest of Hope, the Garden of Hope is the second area you go to in the game as well. But unlike in Pikmin 1, there are 3 different captains in Pikmin 3. And when you go to the Garden of Hope for the first time, you're going there because one of the captains, Brittany, is trapped and starving. So you have to go save her quickly before she, well, dies. Which is already a much better motivator to go to the Forest of Hope. But what's even better is after you save Brittany and travel throughout the game, you'll find Louie, which is the second captain in Pikmin 2, and Olimar's companion. But the Pikmin 3 captains, aka the Copites, think that Louie is Olimar, which is who they are looking for because Olimar has the cosmic drive key, which they need to escape the planet. So they take him back to their ship and fly into orbit. But Louis has other plans. He lands back into the Garden of Hope in the middle of the night and escapes with all your food. So now you need to chase after him while collecting the scraps of food that you can to survive. Now this is amazing. The whole situation is unique because you don't get to choose where you go. You are forced to go back to the Garden of Hope, which you thought you had already completed. And now there's a whole new part of the area to explore. And all the while you want to catch Louis and make him pay for what he's done. So there's no competition between the Forest and Garden of Hope on this one. The Garden of Hope easily wins the story award. Well, now that all the awards are given out, we can count the scores, and because I'm an unbiased judge, the Garden of Hope wins 3-2. Personally, I like the Forest Hope better because the 2 awards that it won, which were the music and the enemies, are just so well done. But I can't give double the points for one award just because I like it a lot. But who knows, maybe I'll change my mind in the future. Although it's not going to be anytime soon. But with that, I've been AKB Rhino, and I'll see you in the next video.